Welcome to Language Swap, everyone, a fun way to learn English. We are so excited to have you join us today.
Hey, Sally, can I ask you something that might sound a little obvious?
Those are usually the most interesting questions. Go ahead.
How much of your hesitation to speak English early on, when you were still building confidence, how much of it was actually about the language, and how much was about wanting the other person to approve of you?
Oh, that's not obvious at all, actually. That's a really uncomfortable question.
I know I'm asking because I think the answer changes everything.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Sally.
And I'm Alex. And today we're talking about something that doesn't get said directly enough in language learning, the need for approval and how quietly it controls everything.
This one's level B1 to C1. And if you've ever softened your opinion, changed your answer, or said nothing at all because you weren't sure how someone would react, this episode is exactly for you.
And if you're a little below that level, stay with us anyway. The conversation today is worth following closely.
Quick favor before we dive in. If you're enjoying the podcast, please like this episode and subscribe. It really helps more people find us.
Okay, let's get into this one.
Let me actually answer your question from before we started because I've been sitting with it and I think the honest answer is uncomfortable.
Go ahead, I want to hear the honest answer.
Early on, most of my hesitation wasn't about the language at all. It was about not wanting to seem less intelligent, less articulate, less capable than I actually was, just because I was expressing myself in a language that wasn't fully mine yet.
So it wasn't I don't know the word. It was I don't want them to think less of me.
Exactly that. And those are completely different problems with completely different solutions.
How long did it take you to realize that's what was actually happening?
Embarrassingly long. Honestly, I spent months studying vocabulary and grammar trying to fix a confidence problem that had nothing to do with vocabulary or grammar.
Because if the problem is approval seeking, more vocabulary doesn't solve it.
Not even slightly. You can know every word in the dictionary and still stay quiet because you're waiting for a signal that it's safe to speak. That signal is approval, and it almost never comes in advance.
I want to talk about what approval seeking actually looks like in a language context, because I think it's more specific than people realize.
What do you mean by specific?
It's not just, I want people to like me. It shows up in very particular ways, ending every statement with a rising intonation, like a question, even when you're not asking anything.
The upspeak pattern turning statements into questions because you're checking, did you receive that? Was that okay? Are you still with me?
Constantly hedging, I think perhaps this could be instead of just saying the thing.
Or apologizing before speaking, sorry, this might be wrong, and then sharing what's on your mind.
Or abandoning your sentence halfway through because you read something in the other person's face, real or imagined, and decided the sentence wasn't worth finishing.
All of those are approval-seeking behaviors dressed up as language problems.
And here's the thing that took me a long time to actually understand. The people whose approval you're seeking most anxiously, they're usually not judging you the way you think they are.
That was such a specific realization for me. Actually, there was a period when I was convinced that every native speaker I talked to was quietly noting my mistakes, categorizing them, forming an opinion about my intelligence based on my grammar.
And were they actually doing that?
One of them told me years later that she'd always found me articulate and interesting to talk to. Even when my English was less polished, she said she barely registered the mistakes because she was too focused on what I was actually saying.
So she was processing content and connection. You were processing error rate.
Completely different conversations happening in the same exchange. And I was so focused on the one happening in my head that I was barely present for the real one.
I think that's one of the most important things we'll say today, actually. The conversation you're having with your inner critic about your performance is louder than the actual conversation happening in front of you.
And the inner critic is not a reliable narrator. It catastrophizes, it exaggerates, and it has a very specific agenda, which is to keep you safe by keeping you quiet.
But quiet isn't safe. We talked about this in the last episode, actually. Quiet just means nothing changes.
I want to bring up something that shifted things for me specifically, because I think it's more practical than just saying, stop caring what people think.
Because stop caring what people think is not actually useful advice.
Not useful at all. Honestly, you can't decide to stop caring. It doesn't work like a switch.
So what actually shifted things for you?
Changing who I was seeking approval from, instead of looking for approval from the other person, which I couldn't control. I started asking myself a different question after each conversation.
What question did you start asking yourself?
Did I say what I actually meant? Not did they approve of how I said it? Just did what came out match what I was actually thinking?
That's such a specific shift from external validation to internal alignment.
And it's a standard I can actually meet. I can't control whether someone approves, but I can control whether I was honest, whether I said the real thing instead of the safe thing.
Can you give me a specific example of what that looked like in practice?
There was a moment in a work conversation where someone said something I genuinely disagreed with. Old version of me would have nodded, maybe added something vague and agreeable, moved on.
And what did the new version of you do differently?
I said I see it a little differently, actually. Can I share my perspective, which is not aggressive, not unkind, just honest?
What happened when you said that?
The conversation got more interesting. The other person engaged with my actual view instead of just having their own view reflected back at them.
And were you approved of?
I don't actually know, and I realized afterward that I hadn't checked. I'd been so focused on what I was actually trying to say that I forgot to monitor the reaction.
That's the shift right there. You forgot to monitor because you were too busy actually communicating.
Exactly that, and I think that's the closest thing to not caring what people think that's actually achievable, not eliminating the desire for approval, but getting so engaged with the actual communication that you temporarily forget to seek it.
I want to bring up something that I think complicates this a little, though, because I don't want to make it sound simple.
Go ahead, I think this matters.
There are real situations where the approval genuinely matters. A job interview, a first impression with someone important, a high-stakes conversation where the outcome actually depends on how you come across.
Completely true. And I think the distinction there is between approval as a goal and impact as a goal.
Say more about that distinction.
In a job interview, you're not trying to be liked, you're trying to communicate competence and fit. Those overlap with being liked sometimes, but they're not the same thing. You can pursue the right outcome without treating approval as the whole point.
So it's not about being indifferent to how you come across, it's about being clear on what you're actually trying to accomplish in that specific conversation.
Exactly. And when you're clear on that, you stop performing for an imagined audience and start actually directing your energy at the real purpose.
I think this connects to something I've noticed in people who are really confident communicators. Actually, in any language, they're not indifferent to impact. They're just very clear about what impact they're actually going for.
And they've stopped outsourcing that definition to whoever they happen to be talking to at the time.
They decide what a successful conversation looks like before it starts, and then they measure themselves against that, not against the other person's expression.
Which is such a more stable place to operate from because the other person's expression is out of your control and it's also often unreadable.
Or misread completely because you're filtering it through all the anxiety and expectation you already brought to the conversation.
I want to go back to the language learning piece directly, actually, because I think there's something specific here for people who are learning English specifically.
What's the specific layer for learners?
There's an extra dimension of approval seeking that's unique to second language speakers, which is the approval of being accepted as a legitimate participant in the conversation.
Not just do they like what I said, but do they accept that I belong in this conversation at all?
Which is a much deeper and more vulnerable kind of seeking, and it can make someone go completely silent. Not because they don't know what to say, but because they're waiting for permission to say it.
Permission that no one is actually withholding.
Almost never, honestly. Most people in a conversation are not auditing your right to be there. They're just trying to have the conversation.
And yet the learner is spending a significant portion of their mental energy managing that worry, which leaves far less available for the actual language.
Which is why two people with identical vocabulary levels can have such different conversation experiences. One is present in the conversation, one is monitoring their own performance from the outside.
The one who's present is going to sound more fluent, not because they know more words, but because they're actually inside the exchange, instead of hovering above it.
And the key to getting inside the exchange, I think, is deciding that your presence there is already legitimate before anyone approves it, before anyone confirms it, just deciding.
That's almost a declaration, actually. I belong in this conversation.
It sounds almost too simple, but I think it's the thing underneath all of it. The people who communicate with real ease aren't necessarily the most skilled. They're the ones who've stopped asking for permission.
I want to add something there because I think it's worth saying directly to anyone listening who's at that specific stage where the knowledge is there, but the voice isn't.
Go ahead. I think this matters.
You've already earned your place in the conversation, not by becoming fluent, not by reaching some threshold of correctness. You earned it the moment you decided to try communicating across a language barrier at all. That's not a small thing.
That's such an important thing to say, honestly, because approval seeking in language learning often comes from a feeling that you haven't yet qualified, that there's some invisible standard you still need to meet before your participation counts.
And there genuinely isn't. Imperfect participation is still participation. An incomplete sentence that communicates meaning is still communication. A mispronounced word that gets understood is still language working the way it's supposed to.
I think what you're describing is redefining what success in a conversation actually looks like, not fluency, not approval, just genuine exchange.
Did something real travel between you and the other person? That's the whole standard. Everything else is secondary. All right, let's slow down and go through the important words from today.
Our first word is approval.
Approval, acceptance or agreement from someone else, often sought unconsciously, especially in high-pressure social situations.
In today's episode, we talked about approval seeking as the hidden driver behind many language learners' silence.
You could say, I realized I was waiting for approval before I'd let myself speak.
Or approval from others is not something you can control, but alignment with yourself is?
Our next word is hedge.
To hedge, to soften a statement deliberately, adding qualifiers to reduce the risk of being wrong or judged.
In today's episode, we talked about hedging as an approval-seeking behavior. I think perhaps this could possibly be,
You could say, I hedged so much that my actual opinion disappeared completely.
or hedging every statement is a sign you're seeking approval more than you're seeking clarity.
Our next word is legitimate.
Legitimate, genuine, valid, accepted as real or justified, often used here to mean having a right to participate or be present.
In today's episode, we talked about learners waiting for permission to be legitimate participants in a conversation they already belong in.
You could say, I kept waiting to feel legitimate before I'd speak.
Or deciding your presence is already legitimate before anyone confirms it changes how you show up completely.
Our next word is alignment.
Alignment, being in agreement or harmony with something, often with your own values, thoughts, or intentions.
In today's episode, we talked about replacing the question, did they approve, with, was I in alignment with what I actually meant to say?
You could say, I stopped chasing their approval and started checking my own alignment.
Or internal alignment is a standard you can actually meet, unlike external approval.
Our final word is outsource.
To outsource, to hand a task or responsibility to someone or something external rather than handling it yourself.
In today's episode, we talked about outsourcing the definition of a successful conversation to whoever you're talking to, and why that's such an unstable way to operate.
You could say, I had outsourced my confidence to other people's reactions for years.
Or stop outsourcing your sense of legitimacy to people who aren't even thinking about it.
So today's words, approval, hedge, legitimate, alignment, outsource.
And they connect perfectly to today's whole message.
Stop outsourcing your legitimacy and hedging every sentence in search of approval.
Find alignment with what you actually meant to say and trust that your presence in the conversation is already legitimate.
And that takes us into say it better.
First sentence, I changed what I said because I wasn't sure they'd agree.
Honest, but let's sharpen it.
A stronger version, I hedged my real opinion because I was seeking approval instead of clarity.
That version names both the behavior and the underlying reason for it.
Next sentence, I don't feel confident enough to speak in groups.
True, but let's be more precise about what's actually happening.
A better version, I'm still outsourcing my confidence to the group's reaction, instead of deciding my participation is already legitimate.
That version identifies the mechanism, not just the symptom.
Next sentence, I want people to like the way I speak.
Understandable, but let's reframe it.
A more useful version, I care about impact, not just approval. Did I communicate what I actually meant?
That version redirects the energy toward something you can actually control.
Final sentence, I'm getting better at not caring what people think.
Good direction, but let's make it more precise.
A stronger version, I'm getting better at staying aligned with what I actually want to say, which leaves less room to worry about reactions.
That version describes the actual mechanism instead of just the desired outcome.
And that's a good place to end. Say it better.
On speaking what you actually mean.
On deciding legitimacy before anyone grants it.
On alignment with yourself as a more reliable standard than approval from others.
Before we wrap up, here's what to actually do this week.
In your next English conversation, notice once, just once, when you're about to hedge, soften, or change what you mean in order to seem more acceptable.
And say the real version instead, not the safe version. The true one.
Notice what actually happens, because almost always what happens is just a conversation.
Tell us in the comments what's one opinion or thought you've been softening in English, and what would the unhedged version actually sound like? If today's episode made you want to stop asking for permission and just say the thing, share it with someone who's been waiting for approval that was never coming.
Thanks so much for listening, everyone.
We'll see you in the next episode.